So it's great to be here, and thanks, Fraser. And I guess in the spirit of that, I'd like to think Alchemie it has a founder's mentality, so it's open, trustworthy, honest, customer-driven, lots of empathy, human spirit, brave human spirit, with an inordinate amount of humility. So that means, based on today, we are a insurgent green swan. Or I'd like to think so. So we're trying to change the textile industry. It's an awful industry. It's the worst industry I've ever come across. And we have this sort of nice view that, of the world on the left in most of that picture. And maybe that is the position around Switzerland. But if you go to one of the 50,000 dye houses around Southeast Asia, it's more like this bottom picture. And the textile industry is undoubtedly just drowning in pollution. This is a typical collection of images outside of a dye house, and this is what we're doing to the planet. So it's the best kept secret in the textile world. Nobody knows this is what's behind making all our clothes, dyeing, finishing all our clothes. It's the second biggest cause of global water pollution in the world, the second biggest. It is in the middle of a climate emergency. Dyeing alone contributes 3% to global emissions. And if we do nothing, that's going to rise to about 10% of global emissions by 2050. The whole fashion industry is currently at 10% of global emissions. So I know the cattle and the beef got a bad word, but the textile industry is a massive contributor to climate change and going above 1.5 degrees C. So that's the problem. So by 2030, there's going to be a water shortage where the demand will be 40% greater than supply. So more and more people are going to die in poor regions, in poor water-rich regions, because partially because of the textile industry and because of all of us. And it takes a human to drink water for about 2.5 years. To create the equivalence of what it takes to dye one cotton black T-shirt. And overall, it generates 30 tons of wastewater, polluted water, that goes into the rivers in Southeast Asia for every ton of fabric that is dyed. So it's a massive problem. And it's using 1.5 trillion litres of water. Doesn't mean much, but it's an awful lot. And so, and we don't need to mention energy prices, I don't think. Textiles, a real consumer of energy, and prices going through the roof, as we all know. So, a really big problem to solve, and it's also a really big market. So it's all the brands talk about it. So we heard about greenwash. Most of the brands are spewing greenwash, but it's their number one priority, so they claim. Addressable market, 39 billion pounds. 400 billion square meters of fabric is dyed a year on average, so that's 10 times greater than the digital textile printing market. So this is 10 order of magnitude higher than inkjet textile printing. And there are 38,000 machines out there that need to be supplied. So massive market. And after 7 years of developing the solution, we believe we have the greenest digital textile dyeing solution. So a rendered image of what we're now currently supplying on the bottom left. You can see our system that's in Taiwan, this one. And what we're now achieving, validated by all the brands, is a 95% reduction in water, elimination of wastewater, a reduction of energy by 85% compared with the traditional dyeing process, a reduction in manufacturing costs of 50%, and a reduction in wasting materials of at least 25%. And so the benefits of this really all about cost reduction, sustainability, and agility. And everybody here knows about the benefits and advantages of digital inkjet printing and the way that brings agility to the supply chain. Well, this does too. So we created a step change, and here are some examples of digitally dyed fabric from our production systems, matching all of the performance requirements that the textile industry needs. How am I doing? Okay. So we've spent 7 years, probably 15, 20 million pounds developing this solution. And it's all based on this little device over here. So it's anybody in inkjet can say, well, that's sort of inkjet. It's a stainless steel tube with a very precise tip at the end, piezo crystal, backing plate, and so we send the resonance frequency through this weld, through the liquid, such that we get a massive amplification at this tip. And what that does is it causes this tip to move a few microns up, and then it draws from the meniscus of liquid onto that tip and then throws it down onto the surface. So much greater momentum than inkjet, bigger collection of drops, and that's what you want. You want drops over a greater area to create a uniform color matching and intensity. And so that's the core of the technology, and that's what we set out with 7 years ago. And this is sort of an image of what the drops we're creating, so that we can go straight. We can get good homogeneity across the fabric, down the web, and also through the fabric. And that towel I showed you was from dyeing from one side only, although generally we're duplex dyeing. So generally, we're producing drops of about 10 microns, and it's this collection of drops that are being jetted that perfectly match the weave and the warp in the fabric, so they penetrate and go through and stick to all the fibers. And that's been the challenge, and that's what we've been doing, creating about 2 billion drops per linear meter. So all those sort of numbers you'll be used to when you're talking about inkjet. And our vision really is all about, you have a factory of the future where you have virgin material coming in, you can dye it, you can print, inkjet print, finish it. So there's half the textile market is finishing as well as dyeing. Water repellency, wicking, breathability, all of these functional materials. And it goes straight to the converter to produce the garment. So all of those things very familiar to the inkjet world, all of those benefits familiar to the inkjet world. And we're now taking this approach to try and change this massive industry. So it's a 4 cornerstone strategy whereby we've got brand endorsement, creating a sustainable future for them. And that's been important to get them, the brands, endorsing what we're doing so that they can then push into the supply chain where we're selling to this sector, to the manufacturers, and we're saving costs for these manufacturers. But that alone is not going to do it. So we're very thankful for these young people who are just not going to stand for what we've done, what most of us have done to this planet over the last period of time. And the only thing I disagree on this slide is it's not planet over profit, it's planet and profit. So this is an extremely profitable proposition. And then the final one, and this is super important, and it's like pushing rope uphill. But lobbying governments to really address climate change is super important, and it's the only way we're going to be successful in the long term. So this is all about going around the world and convincing governments that they need to invest billions into this every year to bring about this change. So I pinched this from Marcus many years ago. I thought it was a good slide then. I think it's a good slide now. But in order to change the textile world, it's a big deal. And we've got to change analog processes, which is never easy. So if you can imagine what's happened with inkjet in ceramics, the same thing is got to happen in textiles. People have got to believe that this is a solution going forwards. And the other dimension to this is really the decarbonisation of this whole industry. And we haven't got everything going for us. But we think the human capacity within the world is not right. So we need 10 times, and I think it's generally accepted, we need 10 times more STEM people than we're educating. And we're not educating people in the right way to bring about these changes. It's on the old traditional education lines. And that's a real problem. We talk about recruiting people today. It's not only a problem about recruiting people, it's recruiting people who are really focused on bringing about this change. And then the other thing is that the financial markets are really broken. Because they're risk adverse and fee based, and what I mean by that, if I've got time, what I mean by that is that if you imagine a charity, what do all the top people in a charity do? They spend all their time raising money, not implementing what they're supposed to be doing as a charity. Technology companies, what do the key people do in a technology company when you're trying to bring about a massive change? They spend all their time raising money rather than bringing about this change. So we've got to somehow create a different environment to invest if we're going to bring about these changes. And then over here, this is where we are. We're in this bubble of chaos. And we've had some early success with customers, and they're great ambassadors and supporters. And during this phase of getting everything right, stumbling across things that we didn't know and putting them right is costing a lot of money. And we're trying to sustain this interest. We're sharing the bumps in the road, but above all, we're customer focused in delivering promises. And we're spending an inordinate amount of money on supporting customers and installations around the world. So we have literally people parked in Taiwan and have been for the last 4 or 5 months, and that's an expensive business. I think it's the consumers that will bring about this change. We all have a choice to make and to bring about this change. And this number is staggering. So if you consider the top 4 textile fashion brands in the world, so that's Nike, Adidas, H&M, and Lululemon, their total revenue is about $90 billion a year. And yet everybody predicts to bring about this change for the next 10 years to stay below 1.5 as a result of the contribution that the textile industry needs to make. We need to invest 20 billion every year. So 25% or so of the top 4 fashion brands' revenue needs to be reinvested into this change. So that's what I'd like to leave you with.
Thank you very much.